I spend a lot of time on personal people connection when I first enter a company. You don't have to come in and be like this big top executive or this big person that's just now their boss. Like you invest in them just as much as they invest in you, like a respect to respect kind of relationship. Because I do demand a lot. I expect people to live up to what I think that they can. And so I'm a little bit hard on that way, but I'm always there to be like, how do I make you get there? Like I'm not going to expect something that you don't know.
Welcome to the Paid to Create podcast, where we dig into the secret strategies of successful creators making a lucrative living. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
I just have to tell you about Kartra, the marketing platform that has seriously transformed my business. You know how running a business can be insanely time consuming, right? Well, Kartra has been a game changer for me. It's honestly like having an entire marketing team in my pocket. And what I love most is that it automates all the tedious daily tasks for me, from marketing to sales to even customer experience. I can't believe how much time and energy I've saved since I started using it. And get this. With Kartra, I can create websites, funnels, courses, membership sites, email campaigns, calendars, surveys, you name it. It's made managing my business so much simpler and more affordable. Honestly, I can't recommend Kartra enough. If you're curious, head to paidtocreatepodcast.com/Kartra to start your trial. Trust me, you won't regret it. Welcome everybody to the Paid to Create podcast. I'm AJ Roberts. Alongside me is the beautiful Sarah Jenkins, and our in-studio guest today is Bonnie Hargrove. Bonnie is one of her own. She's our Vice President of Operations and Customer Experience. So we got a lot to unpack today because she oversees a lot of stuff in the company for us over at Genesis Digital. And so we're super excited to jump in and really get into kind of building that customer experience, that wow experience. But let's back up to when you came in the company, because you came in when all hell had broken loose. We had probably over 3,000 support tickets that we were behind on. The support team was working around the clock, overtime. Everyone in the company was jumping in, and we kind of just threw you into the mix, like you met Sarah, and Sarah was like, hey, I got this amazing person I think is going to really help us in this situation. And you just kind of got dumped in the deep end. So kind of explain that to us.
Yeah, definitely. So first of all, thanks for having me. So when I came in, it was, again, chaos. I walked into a dumpster fire, as I like to call it. But I mean, we had amazing people working. We had amazing people working. They were all doing the right things. They were working overtime. They were, trying to figure out what was going on. So the first thing I had to do was really assess what was happening first. And one of my background pieces was business process optimization. So I was like, okay, what processes can we fix first? Because you don't want to walk in and just be like, here, let me just go change everything. So I wanted to get away of the land. And I found some things that didn't really affect people. So I looked at the software, what softwares were we using, what things were broken. There was a couple bugs in the system that were actually showing us that we had a lot more backlog than we actually had. And then from there, I just slowly started peeling away the people processes. And all of those were wrapped up into years and years of doing things from a smaller company way. So spreading out ourselves. So I just peeled back the onion basically, and then just started working with the staff, growing the staff, putting them in the right roles for what they were good at. And then, just kept moving forward. And we improved the process from, I think, 7 days backlog to 4 now. So
well, I think it was a lot longer than 7 days. We had just launched Webinar Jam 4.0, and so we had the typical launch influx of tickets,
rush,
and then COVID hit, and so basically we weren't normally behind that much. I want to say that, but those two events combined with each other, we saw a huge spike in activity, right? We saw our customers coming back online. We saw new customers coming in, and the tickets just started flooding in because people, as you would expect, as they start using the software again and really trying to ramp things up, from home, being a home-based business company and really helping people who are small business, home-based business owners. It was just a really weird event, series of events that happened, and we'd never experienced anything like that before.
Well, no, the biggest reason we had the big backlog is we actually moved platforms. Even though we kept the interface and the logins, we moved from we totally rebuilt Webinar Jam. So we had to make everybody take their stuff from this Webinar Jam, put it over here. Asking people to move all their assets is a huge, huge ask. And so we didn't even know that would be an issue until it slammed us in the face. We're like, oh no, they're not happy with that. Shoot.
Yeah, and so you walked right into that, and it was like, oh, here's the situation.
fine.
Yeah, it was fine. It was totally fine. Yeah. I mean, no, it was really good. And like I said, the staff really, they all got together and they're like, how are we going to fix this? Like they were really ready for a change. So walking in that moment, yeah, sometimes it's like daunting, right? You walk into something, you're like, this is a mess. But really, they were really receptive to the change at that point. Because sometimes you'll come into a company and people aren't receptive to change. That makes things way worse. But the staff was really, I got to know each one of them. I came in at like, I call it 10,000 feet, get to know your whole staff, who's who, what types of ways are they going to interact with change, and then just worked with them, and they really did the work.
Well, you're incredibly
just
positive as
organized
it is. You always walk in happy. I'm like, what? What happened in your day? Did you get your Lucky Charms this morning?
You just never know.
She's our little ball of joy. But let's look at that, because I think that's a really interesting thing. A lot of people, whether they're going in as a contractor, whether they're going as a freelancer, whether they're going into a position in a company, when they start somewhere, like it's very intimidating, regardless of what position you're coming in at, right? Mm-hmm. When you're coming in a higher position and you're going to oversee people, then it's even harder, because these people are looking, okay, who's this person? Why do they deserve to be here? So maybe talk a little bit about that, like the way you approach that, because you have, since being with us, your roles have changed a little bit, and you've taken on more, and more people are now under you than before. And each time is the same challenge, regardless of whether you're here or you're coming in brand new. So what are some of the first things you do or did when you came in to really start to look at everything, but make sure you had the buy-in from the team? Because I think that's, for any company or anyone trying to do anything, if they're building a staff, getting buy-in is a huge part of being successful.
Yeah. That's a really good question. I spend a lot of time on personal people connection when I first enter a company. I think it's one of my strong suits. I like to create relationships with people, and you don't have to come in and be like this big top executive or this big person that's just now their boss. Like a friend in a workplace, and also like saying that you want to help them grow and investing in them. Like you invest in them just as much as they invest in you, like a respect to respect kind of relationship. Because I do demand a lot. I expect people to live up to what I think that they can. And so I'm a little bit hard on that way, but I'm always there to be like, how do I make you get there? Like, I'm not going to expect something that you don't know. So the first thing that I do is when I come into the company is I made one-on-ones with every single person. And I had, I think, 60 people at that time. So I came in, that was like the first month is just meeting with people. I think it was like 2 a day, and met with every single person, got to know them as an actual person. And then I started doing calls. And even though I had a 24-hour staff, I was getting up at 11 p.m. to have calls with my nighttime staff. And so I spent that time. So it was a lot of working hours when I first started. But I got to know every single person. And even today, like moving up in ranks, I still pretty much know every single person that works in all of those departments that I oversee. Like I personally know who they are and like what their ambitions are. And I also started a quarterly call type thing when I first started to really understand the growth of the people. What do they want to do? Even if it's not working at Genesis, like what do they want to go do in life? Because that matters just as much as what they do at Genesis. So I really create that personal relationship when I first come in. And that creates like trust and respect.
What are some of the things you talk about on those calls to get to know a person, and then also learn about them and their, like what you can see as their strengths and maybe weaknesses and those kind of things?
Yeah, so I kind of do it differently depending on where they sit in the ranking, I guess you'd call it, or like the org chart, yeah. And so people that go direct to me, I have more time with them, so I understand them a little bit more. But how I just in general have a conversation with someone that I've never met before is really just, hey, tell me about who you are as a person, not just like what you do here at work. And so I kind of approach it in that way. But for like quarterly calls, there was kind of a different approach that I took. And that was really, first I asked them just in general, like, how are they? Just question of, hey, before we get started, like, how are you? And I want you to be honest with me. And they would actually open up and be like, well, not great. And I'd be like, are you willing to have this conversation today? Or do you want to maybe like reschedule for another day? And sometimes they would be like, I'm not feeling this today. Like I want to do a different day. And I'd be like, okay. And just that moment, like created respect with them. And then after that, I just asked them a series of questions. What are their goals? I help them understand what SMART goals are. We establish goals for the quarter. And then at the end, I always do some kind of a twist. Like one time, I actually took this advice from you, AJ. Is I use the love languages.
Ignore.
Yeah, so I used the love language concept, and had everybody on my team, if they were willing to take it, the love language quiz, and understand how to use their love languages and help drive them and motivate them to hit their goals.
Yeah, I first heard of that. Obviously for a relationship, right? It's called the 5 love languages, and they've branched off and they have that. And what I realized was that like throughout your life, you meet people and the way they treat you is really how they want to be treated. Mm-hmm. And if you can understand how they communicate, like there's like people struggle with communication. They say, oh, I don't understand my partner. I don't understand my employees. And a lot of times it's because you're not paying attention to what they do. And so the cool thing with the love languages is that you can see their personality and how they actually show love. And so if that's how they show love, then you can give love in the same way. So if you know someone is quality time, and we're a virtual company, which makes it difficult. Like we don't do in-person, like a lot of in-person meetings as a whole company.
Physical touch, right out.
But like with the virtual, like how can you do that, right? You can give high fives virtually. You can have meetings. You can do this. Whereas other people, that's like low on the totem pole. And so words of affirmation. So checking in with them, via Slack and saying, how are you is going to help, or giving them praise, right? And we use Bonusly to recognize people, give them stars, stuff like that. But everybody responds differently. And so the reason that's so important as a leader is if you don't understand the way someone receives appreciation and love, you could be telling them all the time, like with your words, like you're incredible, like you're doing a great job. They will not believe you because that's not the language they communicate love in. So that was something that I picked up in, the other personality tests. But like with that side of it, why do you think the human side is so important to understand? Because I think
I'm huge on it.
Yeah.
It's my number one too.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, what's your love language, AJ?
Mine?
Yeah.
I'm a guy, physical.
No. Not I'm a guy.
No.
Physical touch.
Physical touch is my primary, but quality time. Quality time is the secondary.
What yours?
Quality time and acts of service.
Oh, fun. I'll be sweeping your porch later.
Yeah, definitely. And once I understood that by my team, that really took off. I think after we did that, everyone was kind of more understanding. And I said, if you want to share your love language with some of the people that are around you, feel free, because sometimes working with other people on your team, it's going to help you understand who they are. And I know at that time, my management level at the CS team, they all shared it with each other and they realized how much alike they were. And one of the other things I noticed too is all of them had quality time as one of their top 2 on my management staff. So at that point, I knew that I needed to make sure that I never canceled a one-on-one with them. And still to this day, I will never cancel a one-on-one with one of my staff. I either move it and say, this is the reason that I have to move your one-on-one. And it's not that I'm ignoring you, or I will never cancel this with you. And I still live up to that. And I think it's made a big difference.
We don't have one-on-ones, but I definitely love you.
Well, we're lucky we get to see, because we're here, we get to see each other in person other people don't. So building off of that, foundationally, it's build the relationship. From a business standpoint, coming in, putting the business hat on, looking at it, what's the first thing you looked at to make improvements? Because that's the hardest thing. A lot of people, we've been doing things this way forever. And so change is not only scary, but it's also a lot of work, right? Especially when you already have a lot of people. So if you have processes and things in place and you come in and you start changing, those people get uneasy and this isn't how we've done it. So what was that approach? Because you've done it multiple times in different areas in the company and done it successfully. So maybe just break down the thinking there of how you approach that.
Yeah, sure. So when it comes to certain different types of processes, you have to look at it from a sense of are you looking at software or are you looking at people process? Because you have to approach them completely different. So I have a background in more of a product development side. So when I first came in, that was my go-to, was looking at what we're using and what made sense and what didn't. Because typically when you first come into something, you have to look at it and say, okay, why is this like this? So understand your why, and then say, how do I make this a little bit more efficient, but how do I not interrupt the how people are working? So the first thing I noticed was the software when I came in. There was a bug in the system because I was used to finding those. So as soon as I looked at that, I said, okay, here is a system error that's affecting people process. So I went and said, okay, how to work with the product team, understand what's going on with the product team, and then figure out how to fix it downstream. But typically when you're looking at like people process, you can look at what are they doing that doesn't seem to make all the sense in the world. And a lot of people, when they look at process, they just think it as a whole. But you have to think of it in 3 segments: is like upstream, middle stream, and downstream. And where is the dam, basically? What's blocking everything and what's causing that? And if you can find the cause and fix the cause, it doesn't really affect the people as much. So for example, one of the pieces that we had was escalation. When they were escalating, I noticed that was taking a long time. And just by general looking at data, okay, it's taking a long time. Why is it taking a long time? It seems like there is a break where they're looking at T1 tickets and they're already putting it in the T2 bucket without even assessing what's happening in T1. So actually what's happening is not the T2 issue, it's a T1 issue. So let's go look at what's happening in that department and fix it in that area. In order to not affect people, and because you asked a question about like people don't really like change and like it kind of affects them, is I go to them and explain to them the why of why I'm changing it and ask them if they have any questions of why we're changing it. And if they do, sometimes I'll find that maybe I shouldn't change it, or they'll say, that's a really good question, or like, that's interesting that you're trying to look at it that way. And then we can talk about it like they're my equal, not that I'm just sitting over that I'm going to change something that I want to listen to them and understand why.
So sometimes as a business owner, when you're trying to scale and you're trying to grow, you need other people that have skills that you don't have. I know that sounds obvious to say, but I would have never found a bug. And I had tickets escalating to me, which I heard was not the best idea. So you came in and saw the bug, saw the process, fixed the people. I was like, wow, we moved our entire company from Skype to Slack. And I was like, oh, we'll just change. And you're like, no, we have to tell and prep people. Otherwise, they're going to be freaked out. I'm like, why? We're just making this change. You're like, trust me. People need to know what's going on beforehand. I was like, meh. And then you did it. And I was like, oh, thank God you did it right.
Yeah. And I think like one of I call it my superpower is pattern recognition. If you can see patterns and breaks in patterns, that's typically when you can find what to fix. But yeah, telling people is so essential. So a lot of times
I don't even know
people
that.
skip
you
the people.
keep making me tell people stuff. And I'm like, why? And you're
Yes.
trust me, it'll go better. And it always goes better. So I'm like,
transparency is where it's at.
So explain what you just said about your super skill is seeing patterns. Mm-hmm. So break that down. Like, what does that look like to you?
That's interesting. Yeah, like now you're gonna make me really think deep. So that's interesting because I think pattern recognition is something that not everyone has, but when you do have it, you almost don't know how it works. Like sometimes I think about like, how do I know this? And I don't even know how I know it. Like, I'm like, do I live in a past life? I'm not sure. So I think what it comes down to is the way that maybe that you learn. When I was younger, I had to learn in a lot different way than most people because I had a lot of health issues when I was young. So I pretty much skipped 2 grades. So I skipped part of kindergarten and all of 1st grade because I had an appendicitis and I had issues with my eyes. And so when that happened, I became all auditory learning because I couldn't really see well, and I skipped 1st grade to learn how to read. So when I did that, I think that kind of affected the way that I started seeing patterns and like I just learned differently. And so I think maybe that has something to do with it, but I'm not really sure. So when you tell me to break it down, I could probably, if I like sat here and thought about it for a while, I could probably say, okay, the way I look at patterns is what's broken and like, let's fix it. But I'm not quite sure, to be honest.
Well, maybe try looking at it from a standpoint of like, let's say when you came in and you were looking at the customer support software, like, and you saw all the issues. What led you to start going, okay, maybe this is a bug in the software? Because when I was looking at it, because I was in answering tickets and
we're all
like we're all answering as many tickets per day. Like it never, like my thing was I don't understand how a lot of our team is not answering more tickets. Like
right, me and him were answering billing ones. Like we just did 20 in like 3 hours, got 20 tickets done.
And so thinking like, oh, maybe the tickets that is showing is not actually the tickets. Like, so what, like essentially, how do you follow these threads and get to the root cause?
Yeah, definitely. So for that piece, it might have something to do with the fact that I used to be a QA. So I was used to looking at all of that stuff. So when I was given something, like even if it's small, I could go in and look at it and identify what was wrong just by looking at it. So that was a learned behavior. I learned it through that job. I had to, because if you miss something, like you caused it to go out live and it was completely your fault.
So it's more like a checklist.
It was
right?
more of a
You're going,
checklist. Like, okay, how does this
isn't
work?
an issue. This isn't an issue. So you're just going through that
exactly.
mentally.
So like you're looking at it like, how is this supposed to work? Like ideally, like if I looked at this, like even if it's a process, I want it to work like X. It's not working like X. Now follow through. How should it work? Okay, where is the broken piece? And that's kind of like how I look at it, is what should be the ideal situation. And if it's not working that way, working backwards, determining why.
It's interesting because I wouldn't have said that my super skill is pattern recognition, but the way when I look at a funnel or, or a web journey, a customer journey, I'm looking at like what is broken in that journey, right?
Yeah.
Where are the opportunities? Like this is how it's supposed to work. Like if these are the industry averages, like 30% opt-in on the front end. If we're not getting a 30% opt-in, then what do we need to change to do that? Because if we get that bump and maybe it's the traffic source, not the traffic, right? Maybe it's the ad that's driving the traffic and there's a mismatch. And so it's a very similar process. And I think Andy used to call it thinking backwards. And that was something he passed on to me.
That's why Kartra was built that
way. How we built Kartra, right?
Yeah,
like
backwards.
you started with the end in mind and you work backwards. And I think that the benefit to that is you don't miss any steps, right? You do get to evaluate each thing. And if it's working good, it's a check, right? Like there's no need to go deep on that. It's like the process works good, check. And then you get to that, what's that bottleneck or what's that, I think you call it the dam. And then you say, oh, there's the problem. And a lot of times, especially creative people don't think like that because we're always in problem solving mode. So like we just go, oh, more traffic or, like
more money.
Yeah, we're not as analytical typically, right? Data, we operate more on emotions and feelings than data. Yep. Very few super creative people are data people. I've learned to love the data because it supports a lot of the times.
It supports your feelings.
My feelings. But I've also been very wrong with the data, right? And I've thought one thing and the data just says something different and it's very humbling. But I think that's what is important to understand is that no matter how you think or what your personality is, the reality is you have to see, you mentioned earlier, the 10,000 foot view. You have to be able to zoom out because a lot of the times if you're in the day-to-day, which we were at the time when Bonnie came in, we were in the trenches. Yep. So we weren't even looking for these things because we were just like, how do we answer these tickets? And I think that for the listeners who own their own business or they're in a business, no matter what role you're in, that's a key skill that you can say, I'm going to figure out how to master this and understand the entire process. How does my skill, like let's say a copywriter, for example, like you're writing copy, great, but like how does that actually go across the entire, marketing plan or something like that? And then like, what are the impacts of that? And, each component of that's supposed to do a certain thing. And if it doesn't, that's how I can get better or that's how we can get better as a company.
Exactly. When you said zoom out, that's 100% it. Like you have to be able, even if you're stuck in the day-to-day and things aren't working right, is taking a second to step back, take a bigger view of what is happening. And I think that's kind of when I came in, like you said, you were so in the day-to-day and stuck that I was coming from a fresh new perspective. And sometimes you need that. And that's kind of...
Well, and you have a totally different skill set than me and AJ. We do the business owner thing, but we got to where there's thousands of tickets. We're like, oh no, we need to fix it. We were already stuck before we figured out we had to fix the whole process. So we brought in someone with a different set of skills. Like you've done QA. You did, what is it?
The business optimization?
Yeah, but you did more than that. Like you built AI stuff or whatever. And I was like, holy shit, you've got skills that I need. And I know you would know where to put them in my company. So please work for me.
Too late.
I think the thinking time is important. And I know since you took over as CEO, like your thinking time has become a lot more important. Whereas before it was very day-to-day, very operational. And I think that any leadership role, like thinking time almost has to be built into your calendar.
Well, I was VP. When Andy was president, I ran the company and he was resting most of the time, but he was the creative business owner, and I did the operations. I did the accounting. I did the check the vendors. Are we paying them? How are the staff? How are they feeling? Like I operated like you do, but I didn't have some of the skills that you have. So when I actually just became then president, I was like, oh no.
It's a very different thing. So you talked about how you get buy-in from your staffing, like those that are reporting to you. How do you get buy-in from above? Because that's another skill set. And a lot of times you can come in, you're gung-ho, like, okay, we're going to make these changes. This is going to be great for the company. But then you have to go get approval from someone who is like, well, it's not broken, so why would we fix that? Or
Yep, that's what I said.
It's going to cost us how much more, right?
No.
So how do you approach that? Because that's one thing I've always been impressed in, is like your ability to get like things that
people to say yes.
I never thought would be approved. Yes, people to say yes.
She gets what she wants.
I was like, maybe this is a skill set in sales. I don't know. I have a perfect example for this. So one of the processes that were broken when I came in was that we were using 3 help desks. I know this sounds really
you were
insane.
Pull that one as an example. I knew it. So I was like, no, we're not changing. We're not changing.
Yeah. So we had, I think, like 2 Kartra ones, and we had a live agent one, and we had like some other thing that people were using. And so I took a look at it, and I was looking at how we were using all of them. And the reason we had done it was a really good reason. I mean,
Sure.
We were using our own software. It seemed like the right thing to move over. But with the size of our team at the time, like it didn't make sense to like fully try to get them to move over. And so I was like, oh man, I'm going to have to convince my brand new boss that we need to purchase this giant help desk to support some of these changes that I'm making. Cause I was like, we can always go back. I was like, but for right now, because we're in such chaos, like I need to make sure that there's no bugs, it's perfect. And all of the processes, I can set it up and I can configure it myself. Because again,
is a bad one.
Background and configuration. So I was like, if I get my hands into this thing and I can configure, I can move a lot quicker.
Mm-hmm.
And we can make sure that our customer experience is good from the front end. Customers feel like we look the same, or all of that stuff's normal. So what I did was I went and did a whole bunch of research on what is, how can customer experience affect your top numbers, how can it affect churn, all of those things. And I made a full analysis of why and how much money that we could save from a CX standpoint by switching to this software. And so I went and did a whole presentation to Sarah. She probably remembers it really well. And I said, look, if we spend X amount of dollars, like we can get potentially X amount of dollars from this one process change, in churn reduction or whatever it is.
No. She said, you're losing $1 million a year if you don't change to this help desk. So it's only going to cost you this much to change. And the happier customers, they'll stay longer, millions on the table. And I was like, well, of course I'm going to do that.
Yeah. And so she said yes, and then we converted it all back over. So that's kind of how you do it. So find the reasoning, even if you have to go and say, this is in general what it could potentially do to you if you let this bad process, because process can really affect
You weren't
the
wrong.
cost and expense of your company.
Yeah.
That was a huge move for us. So I didn't even understand what you were saying. But when I look at it, I back up now, I say, okay, we had our own help desk, but our own help desk is for coaches, consultants, products, book sales, coaching sessions that you've bought on the internet. Ours is for technical QA data, extra issues that they have in the software. Well, nobody else in our database is selling software through Kartra, so they're never going to need that level of help desk. So we're using our own help desk, but it wasn't best for us, but it is best for our most of our customers.
Yeah, nobody's selling software like us. Like there's single use software and customers, but like nobody's selling an all-in-one platform. And that was the thing that was hard with that thought process, was like, okay, how do we justify using a third party, when we're supposed to? And the reality was, when we looked at the things we wanted to change, and this is something that's important too, is understanding like when you should do something versus when someone else should do something. And what it came down to was, these changes only affect us. Like, it doesn't benefit our customers whatsoever. It takes up our time, our resources, our investment, and the only people it helps is us. This platform over here has everything we need, doesn't cost us anything from a time standpoint to build, and our customers aren't losing out because we didn't add in certain things. But what's real key, I think what you said, is turning it from a cost to an investment, right? And showing someone, if you don't invest today, then you potentially are going to lose that. I think that's pretty genius, and I've seen you do it many times.
Buy our Bitcoin.
Obviously, when you first came in, it was mostly customer service focused. We didn't really have customer experience, right? And you and I were always talking about it, and I was saying, man, I wish we could do this for the customer journey. And we just, we sometimes you have to go at the pace you can go at, right? Like you have to walk before you can run. But now your role's expanded. You're overseeing customer experience. Let's walk through what a customer journey is and kind of how you build an experience around it. Because one of the things I've seen, especially with content creators, people who sell courses online, coaches like that, they're very heavy on the front end. They're very good at marketing. Lots of great marketing, lots of great content videos out there. They might be excellent on Instagram and YouTube, but then the customer purchases a product and they get delivered an 8-week course or something. But that's about it, right? The experience is you've bought the product. The experience is here's your ebook, here's your course, here's the thing you've purchased. But that's not really an experience. That's kind of the bare minimum, right?
That's what I thought the experience was. If you get customer service, you've been helped, go on your merry way. Great, we have a great experience.
So let's dive into that and kind of walk through that.
I was like, how much I can talk about this subject. Man, that's such a big topic. But I think I'm going to start with kind of how we're approaching it, just because, people that are watching this, like if you're an owner, always start with your experience. Don't do it the way we did. Just kidding. But so you want to look at it as what kind of connection do you want to create with your audience or the people that come in or your community? And that's like the biggest piece is how do I create a community that people want to be about? Because what we're selling is a software. And AJ says this all the time, like Kartra is the tool or Webinar Jam is the tool. But how do we make it to where they don't want to go use any other tool because the community is so good? Or their experience is so good that if they went somewhere else, they wouldn't experience the same type of thing. So really, this is pretty brand new of like what we're trying to bring into our company, but what we're looking at is segmenting the journey into different pieces. And understanding our customers of how they're feeling, what actions that they're taking in the software, or what are they doing throughout their experience with us until they leave. And of course, we want to keep them as long as possible because we want them to love our softwares and stay with us. And so what we're doing is we're segmenting the journey into different phases. And each one of those phases, we're determining how should someone feel, whether that is that they're still assessing the software, they want to feel connection, they want to, like all those different things. And
do you ask them what their love language is, though?
We do not ask them about their love language, but maybe. Maybe once they're in the community. So when they first come in, what we've changed is looking at creating connection and one-to-one humanistic experience. So kind of like I talked about earlier, how I create connection with my team, I'm trying to take that vision and strategy and push it towards our customers. So what people want to feel is connection. Like when they come into something, they don't want to just feel like they're another number. No one ever wants to feel that. So what we're trying to create is, hey, welcome to our family, really. And we really do want to connect with you, understand what do you need from us so that you feel like you never want to leave. And that's really what we're creating. And through that, we're trying to create different touch points, maybe touching them through video or phone calls, text messages, email, like hitting them all different types of touch points in each one of those phases. So like, let's say you create 5 phases out of 100 days. You want to have at least 5 of different touch points in each one of those. So you don't want to just email them or just give them phone calls, but you want to maybe have something that they can print, have something that they can get in the actual, I call it snail mail, something that they can get a phone call, an onboarding member that's a true person, not just like an automated experience. So that's kind of what we've been adding.
Yeah. What's interesting with that is you mentioned, do we ask them the love languages? We don't. But the touch points cover that, right? Mm-hmm. So the different touch points, email, text message, phone call, like you could do, a Zoom or call like that, snail mail, like all the different touch points, sending gifts, surprise bonuses, all of those essentially hit those 5 love languages, right? Mm-hmm. Even acts of service where it's like, how can we help you do this, right? Like you're looking at that. And I'm speaking because I know what you're doing. Yeah. Like that is essentially how you eliminate having to ask them. Some stuff will hit and they'll be excited. Some stuff they'll kind of ignore. And it's kind of like when you build a community. Some people like recognition. Some people don't care about it, right? Yeah. It's like some people are competitive and want to know how they stack up against everyone else. Some people are in their own lane and couldn't care less. And so, but not to have it you run the risk of losing those people based on the fact that that's what they need, right? And you think to yourself, now, a lot of people go, oh, well, we just sell a tool, right? They should know what their product is. They should know how to deliver it. We don't have to teach them any of that stuff. We don't have to help them. But the reality is a lot of people, they only know a little bit and they need help and they need guidance. And so when you start adding that stuff in, you have kind of the golden triangle with an offer where you've got the tool, but you also have the map and you have the guide, and you're giving them all the things they need to succeed. And whether they use it or not is irrelevant. It's the fact that it's there. And I think that goes back to what you've always said. Like, you've always wanted world-class customer experience. Like, that has been something that you've always preached about, and we're moving we're moving more and more towards that. And I think that it's interesting seeing what that does to your customer base and how your customers turn into advocates. They go from just using it to basically being a part of
loving it.
Everything. Yeah, loving it, sharing it, talking about it with people, recommending it to people. And essentially you create this viral word of mouth marketing from actually caring. And I think that that's something a lot of companies, it's not that they don't want to do it, they just haven't seen the ROI from it, in their minds, right? It's one of those things you said, like, the ROI is not instant, is an investment. We have to spend money.
But look what you're losing out on if you don't.
Exactly.
Yep, I see a trend with me.
So you mentioned about different personalities, and what kind of challenges does that create for an onboarding experience, knowing that people are different?
Yeah, I mean, it's truly understanding that people are all different. And I think looking at it from a segment of understanding, what are the main ways that people are that we have. So really understanding our community and who's in there and knowing that they're all different. So how do we create an experience that is, it adheres to all of them? So how do they feel when they get this, or how do you segment them into buckets? Because it's hard. You can't really, people are so different, you can't segment them really easy. So some of the things that we're looking at is more psychological factors. What motivates people is really what we're focusing on. And, people have there's a lot of different theories on it, but they have different ways that they're motivated. And so what we're doing is we're putting in buckets of motivation. And there's different ways that you can segment your customer experience, but that's the one that we're trying to do. And really it's understanding if this person is motivated by success, or do they like to work with people, or do they like other people to tell them how to do it? And if we understand those things and we put all of those pieces into that experience, we should keep people wanting more, really.
Yeah. It's about that customized experience. I think that's why so many people don't do it, because essentially what you're creating is kind of a pick your own path adventure. Right. We have to figure out what kind of person you are and then send you on the right path in order to communicate with you in the right way. And that's really when you look at stick and churn, and that's what, a lot of people try to figure out. They say it's 9 times more expensive to get a new customer than it is to keep a current one. When you look at that, you go, okay, the impact of this is huge, because the first fundamental thing is, does the product do what it says it's going to do? And that's something that we always laugh about when people are like, I can't believe Kartra actually does. It's what is it not supposed to do what we say it's supposed to do?
Surprise, it works.
Exactly. How is that a surprise that we actually function the way we function? We actually do the things we say we do. But it's when you go to a restaurant and you have good food. Okay, great. But if the waitress is rude to you, the experience is different, right? Or if you sit down and you see a rat run across the wall, it doesn't matter how good that food is, you're probably never going back there.
Unless it's a burrito, definitely going back there.
Okay, we don't need your trips to Tijuana. But I think that's the piece that people need to understand, is that your product, whatever you sell, whatever you're creating, isn't the only deciding factor on whether someone is happy, but not just happy. Are they ecstatic? Because that's what keeps people for a long time. And it also buys you grace, right? For when you do have issues like we had with the support stuff.
Had that. No.
When we had all those things, we had loyal customers that were okay. We understand, and they have more patience with you because they've seen the investment you put into them. Obviously, since you started implementing these things, the community and things have shifted, what are some of the cool things you've seen change within the community as you started adding these things in?
Yeah, my favorite part is seeing the feedback and people acknowledging that things are changing. And that's huge, right? When people that have been here for a really long time, they're like, wow, you guys are having, full on calls with your community now. We have, represents people that represent us and on my team that go into these big calls and they like talk to people one-on-one. So I kind of talked about the H2H approach, which is like the human to human type of interaction. And they're starting to say like, we're noticing that you guys are creating connection so much more. And I think that's the most exciting piece because that's really what we're trying to do. So it's like instant gratification from it is that, my amazing staff, they're sitting there and they're on these calls and people are giving them immediate feedback of, wow, Kartra is changing. It's starting to be, I feel like I'm part of something. And our experts too, they're, really contributing to that as well and talking to our staff members and getting on calls and things like that. So
Very cool.
yeah.
Oh no, the thing that frustrated me, I learned to stop looking at other groups on Facebook in the comments, like some sort of weird inclusive celebrity or whatever, because you're saying mean things about the software, nice things about the software, and I want to see it all. But the mean things, man, the worst thing I ever read was someone said, since Andy died, the company's lost heart. And I was like, let me at them. I was like, no way. If anything, we focus more on the customer and each individual, from the janitor to the pilot to the guard at the airport. Everyone has a very important function and we believe it's important. So we treat it as important, the janitor to the pilot. Like everyone in the airport has an extremely important role to play. Every customer and every staff member of my company has an extremely important role and we value it. So now that they're seeing that we value them, that's what I always wanted.
Yeah, definitely. And even when you're always going to have people that say negative things, but how we look at it is if someone's giving something negative, how do we either turn that around or understand it at a deeper level? And it's, we don't take it personally. We're just like, okay, I mean, that one's hard. That one's hard not to. But, when you're looking at it, it's like, why is this person feeling this way and getting it deeper and then saying, how do we create a solution? Again, we talked about this earlier of looking at the bigger picture. People have solutions as well. So,
it made me look at our customer service tickets. I'm like, are they answering robotic? Are they not answering like they care? Like, hey, how was your day? We're here to help you fix your ticket, whatever. Why is it more personal? So I did go and start looking around and going, why did that comment ever show up?
Exactly. Yeah. So it's just like looking at the bigger picture, finding solution for it, even if it's people, and deep diving in how do we be better for our customer, not necessarily better for our tool or for our success, but for our customers, because that's who we're servicing.
Yeah. And I know, talking with some of the staff that are implementing it, one of the things they've noticed is sometimes, because we're talking about customer feedback, we're not talking about just random troll comments or anything like that. Those you got to ignore. But when it's a customer saying stuff, that there's an exchange happening between you. And if they're unhappy, it's your job to understand. And sometimes you're not going to be able to make that customer happy because you're not the other software they came from with the feature that they want. But it's about listening to them. And the feedback I've heard is that oftentimes they come in really hot, but as soon as they realize someone's willing to listen, the conversation shifts and it ends up being very positive for them. And what they're frustrated about is something small, there was a misunderstanding, or they didn't get the answer they expected, so the expectation was off. And because we have that human-to-human connection a lot more now, it seems as if like those comments are a few and far between, but when they are there, we do spend the time to understand it, and usually that person is happy at the end of it. And I think that's something that's important because a lot of business owners shy away from those comments. Like they kind of they either don't want to see him, hear him, or they just say, it's none of, like a lot of people, I heard, I don't know if this is true, but I heard early when PayPal started up, they had a customer email that you email, and it was just an inbox that nobody checked, right? Because they just didn't care.
Word.
They were just not interested. Now,
it's so funny and horrible.
And some businesses choose to do that. So I think that's really, really important. What do you think, like, within a community is key to building a community? Because, a lot of companies go, well, we're just a software company. Like, why would we focus on building a community, like building a tribe? Like, why is that so important for any business?
Yeah, it's creating connection between other people, not just with us. So I think that's the most important piece is helping people find their people so that they can be successful. And offering different opportunities for people to partake in so that they can meet other people. And so as you create different connections of people, they go off and do other things. Like maybe they go start a business together, or they go and they're
That's
like,
harder.
oh, I've always needed a page built for me.
to
And this
do.
guy helped me build my page, and you guys connected me. So creating that sense of community, like they would have never met that other person if they had never went to Kartra and got Kartra as a software. So that creates a sense of loyalty.
So you're saying we need to do a live event?
Oh my word. Well, we actually had that with our staff. I had, when we started the bonus league, I started seeing what other people would give like these golden stars to, somebody helped me come and jump my car. I'm like, what? You guys are actually meeting in person? That's weird. Someone sends a pizza to someone in another country. I'm like, holy crap, my staff is doing awesome. Like just caring for each other physically in weird off-site ways I had no idea about, which makes me really happy. But I think it's way harder to connect your customers with their people outside of you. I have a hard time putting together that game plan.
If you think about it, we're all like sitting at home, oftentimes like alone, working on our computer, and our circle of friends around us aren't doing the things we're doing. So the conversations you have with them typically aren't around, how do you build this funnel, or like what's the latest hack you've learned to optimize something. And so like when you find other people like that, it's one reason I love going to masterminds and events is the conversations you have are like deep conversations. And when you really think about it, we spend most of our time on this stuff, right? And so when you find other people that also spend most of their time on that stuff, it's a natural like,
you have a 3-hour breakfast.
You're my people, right? Like you're my friends. And I think that, like you said, when you build those connections between them, like they remember that it was through the company, right? It was because they were Kartra customers. And so that loyalty to you goes a lot further. And you know what it's like you have a lot more tolerance with friends and family than you do with just random strangers. And the reason for that is because you build a level of trust where you actually feel like they have your best interest. And so if we can constantly show that, then they're going to show that back to us. And it becomes this beautiful relationship where you actually, benefit each other. It's not just transactional, it's relationship, relationships that you're building. And that to me is really like, you can look at business as business, but I think what's really changed in the last 2 decades is understanding that like for the majority of people, where they work is where they spend most of their time. So naturally, that's going to be where they build friendships. Like who they do business with is a majority. Is a lot of that's who they're going to build friendships with. And so some of my best friends like live in across the country, and I only see them a couple times a year. But when we hang out, it's incredible. And I think if you can build those connections and think of ways to harbor those, that is when you start to shift a company's culture, DNA of the company, and there is this kind of movement or like energy like that people can sense and feel. They don't know what it is, they can't explain it, but they like it. They want to be on that train. They want to be traveling that journey with you. Well,
people spend money based on their emotions. If you have 2 bottled water companies and one is donating 10% to feed hungry children, you'd be like, I might pick that one because you spend money with your emotions. Mm-hmm. Usually like you and I got into fitness to better our bodies and help other people. Shut up. Well,
he's like, let me just flex a little
5
bit.
kids later. No, you get into help people. And so I think some people, I guess business owners, we do something that we're passionate about because we're trying to help someone, and the dollar follows. So you charge for the value that you're providing. But even for me, it's a stupid software. Like it's just a tool, right? But it's not. I'm creating this so that I can give other people freedom to build businesses and make money, to stay home with their kids, to not, have to go to work and commute and leave their wife and kids or their husband and kids to go to a job where they have a limited income. Like, I don't like that at all. I want the freedom to build what you're passionate about so you can help others. So if I can help you with your company through the software, and that software allows all these people to create companies and products that help all these people, that's where my motivation is at. and the almighty dollar will follow, but that's not what it's about. And that I think that's what you're talking about. The new generation is coming up with, it's not always about the dollar. It's not always about how much money you can make. It's your passions.
I was going to say, I was reading this book the other day, and it's one of the brand new books that came out. I can't remember the author, but he was talking about how this next generation that's coming up, I mean, your kids coming up, is the loneliest generation that'll ever be in U.S. history or even the world history. And that's because of all of the pandemic and all those things. And the boom of the internet has really made people, they can connect with more people, but they're more lonely.
It's not real.
Yeah, it's not like a real true connection. And so the companies that shift to more of a connection type, like marketing and experience and all of those things, and they really empower people in that way, are going to be the companies that survive, and the ones that don't, well, they won't. And they talk about how advertising was huge back in the boomers generation, because it was brand new to them. They just got the TV. They got this fancy ad on the TV, and they're like, wow, look at that
I want the Power Ranger.
That's so cool. Yeah, I want that Power Ranger. Yeah. But
Well,
now
they also had no restrictions.
Yeah,
on what they
but
could
now
say.
Because you didn't get the pink one. It's
Smoke
fine.
this cigarette.
I shotgun the
It's
pink
fine.
one.
Approved by 10 doctors.
yeah, and everyone did it, right? And so advertisement is not going to be as big, they say, in 10 to 15 years, because now
We don't trust it. We've learned.
it's ad fatigue, right? You're on TikTok or Instagram, it's an ad every 5 seconds, and kids know just to swipe away from it. And so that's going to be the generation that's coming up. And so the people that aren't connecting with they're not going to buy.
Yeah, it's a different connection, relationship, and the reality is a lot of people don't understand our fundamental programming, that there's no control of our own, right? Like the subconscious, the desire, what you crave, and people crave human to human connection. And I agree with you. I think whatever companies can do to foster that, they're going to be better. Now, there's some products obviously that don't serve that purpose, but when you look at it, like you said, the water, right? Like buying a water bottle, or a bottle of water from the store, there's no experience beyond that better tastes like good water, right?
The bottle might be prettier.
If the bottle is there's that liquid death that comes in a can, that water, but it's a brand, it's an attitude, but people purchase because they feel like it represents them in a certain way. And so I think the more of that people can lie into and start to think about what do we represent? How do we represent it? Do the people who purchase our stuff, does it invoke emotions and feelings, like you said? I think that's the path forward for majority of companies. And I think that what you see is this split because, there's the focus on money, like you mentioned, profit, money. But the reality is that's always a byproduct, right? It's a byproduct of whatever they're getting. And so, like I was talking with my tattoo artist, there's levels, right? And there's tattoo artists that still charge $75 for a tattoo you can walk in off the street. And then there's tattoo artists who are charging $2,500, $5,000 a day to go sit and they put art on your body, and there's different levels. They both survive, but eventually those lower ones they fade because the quality and the expectations and everything changes. And you couldn't do that 20 years ago because there was no comparison globally. Now any company can start up anywhere in the world and have a global audience. And not only that, the audience can compare against other companies without ever experiencing the other company. Just from the outside, you can get a feel for what do they represent? How do they carry themselves? How do they dress? How do they look? What do they talk about? And you can say, do I fit in with that group or not? And people do make purchase decisions. We can be the best software in the world, but there are some people who just wouldn't do business with us based on the way that our website looks, because they have a different opinion on how it should look. And they could say it's not professional enough or it's too professional, right? And, some people love to wear suits. Other people think a suit is a guy looking like a monkey up there, so you have to, figure out ways to essentially humanize a brand. And I think that's why we've talked about this. People don't follow brands, they follow people. And the companies that are doing the best, Richard Branson's a great example. Richard Branson is the embodiment of, or I should say Virgin is the embodiment of Richard Branson. His company is an extension of his personality, an extension of his fun, is an extension of the way he does things. And that's how businesses, in my opinion, are going to survive and thrive as we move forward. So
His airline is really fun.
Yeah.
They have music and stuff. Everyone's happy. Like, I want to be on that airline.
Yeah, and that's how we hope to develop. That's what we want the feeling around us. It's fun, supportive. It's in parallel. What does success look like? Well, this is a part of what it is. So, anything else you want to share?
I mean, I think we covered a lot. I hope it's insightful and helpful for our audience, and they can get something out of it and really focus on building out those aspects for themselves, because I think it's really important. So,
cool.
Yeah.
Hire people with different skills than you. Hire people that can argue with you and get what's right for the company, and then connect with your audience and your staff. That's what I got out of it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Very good. All right, everyone. Thanks very much. We'll see you on the next episode. I just have to tell you about Kartra, the marketing platform that has seriously transformed my business. You know how running a business can be insanely time consuming, right? Well, Kartra has been a game changer for me. It's honestly like having an entire marketing team in my pocket. And what I love most is that it automates all the tedious daily tasks for me, from marketing to sales to even customer experience. I can't believe how much time and energy I've saved since I started using it. And get this. With Kartra, I can create websites, funnels, courses, membership sites, email campaigns, calendars, surveys, you name it. It's made managing my business so much simpler and more affordable. Honestly, I can't recommend Kartra enough. If you're curious, head to paidtocreatepodcast.com/Kartra to start your trial. Trust me, you won't regret it.